make it today. All right, well, before we sort of end up talking to you a lot more, I thought it would be great to hear from some of the people who either received funding or were part of a huddle as part of our first year. And that's partly to sink us into some imaginings about what might have happened and to inspire us for kind of what might happen in year two, and to just give us that real felt experience from the community of kind of how they've got involved. So Annegret, I think we're going to start with you. Is that right? Do you want to unmute yourself and say hello?
Hello, everyone. So nice to be here. I'm in Johannesburg at the moment, making the most of the summer here. Before I dip my toes back into UK weather.
It's getting better. It's getting better.
Yeah, no, I've been getting pictures of blooming trees and flowers, and so I'm more inclined to return.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So Annegret, just tell us briefly, what was it that you received funding for? What was your project?
Yeah, I'll give a bit of background on what I do also to give context. I'm an ecological artist and a culture futurist, and daydreaming is one of the cornerstones of my creative practice. And it's an ecological imagination practice where I say the sensuous, visionary, creative, somatic, and spiritual mingle. And inspired by this practice, I created an experimental gathering called We Used to Lay in Meadows Dreaming. And the goal was to inspire a collective practice inspired by my own personal practice and encouraging our ecological awareness, our sensuous knowledge, inspired by wildflower meadows, which is my favorite place to go and daydream. And yeah, and invited people to come and dream with me, to imagine themselves as joyful and creative and thriving ecologies in this time of crisis. And it was also an invitation for us to sense the stories, the possibilities and interconnectedness that can arise from such places.
That's wonderful. So tell us a little about what happened, like what's been meaningful.
I think do you have one? Do you have I think the image where there are multiple images on it would be really nice to share at this point.
Is that coming? Can you see that?
Jake, I think you might need to stop sharing your sound so that Hannah can share the image.
Yeah.
At work, sorry, it's just me being.
So you just need to stop sharing your screen.
I don't know how to do that.
There you go. Yeah, excellent. Okay, we'll try again. Here we go.
Oh, beautiful. Okay. And so basically, because of how the seasons turned out in the UK, I ended up hosting the experiment from an endangered wildflower ecology here in South Africa, in the Cape Floral Kingdom. It's an ecology called fynbos. And it was really amazing. People from all over the world came together to participate in this experiment. And we just spent time sensing, dreaming, observing, resting and moving and exploring the beauty and the mysteries of meadows. And basically what happened was that I ended up being the only one in a real meadow because of the time of year. for most people, they found themselves in a space where they had to join from their imaginary meadow. So on day one, everyone described their meadow. And this is basically what came through in our WhatsApp group. This image was then a collection of some of these meadows that were imagined. And so, as I said, we gathered in this WhatsApp group, and I hosted live sessions, and I provided prompts every day over the space of a week. And we basically just shared our observations, reflections, and insights. And it just built this whole dreamy world that wasn't just collective. It was also the start for an individual practice. As much as we were collectively coming together, it became very clear very quickly, because people were in their own context. That hello, that's all right. Sorry, someone. That we will. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Because it said that I was muted, but I'm not, right? Everyone can hear me.
You're fine.
Okay, cool. So the stream of consciousness, like this very insightful and very intimate stream of consciousness, unfolded over the 7 days. And it almost became like its own timeless daydream. And so every day we would visit our meadows, and I was just really amazed by how intimately and openly people were sharing their insights and their experiences, responding to these prompts. And so what struck me was that it didn't really matter in what kind of meadow we were and where we were. That basically we could, wherever we are, imagine a meadow, and that we could always find and create that place in our imagination to go and daydream and connect with each other's imagination in this wild and free way wherever we are. And so really what emerged out of this whole experience was that we raised some very big questions. And that is kind of the place that I love getting people to feel free enough to ask really bold questions. So I've listed some of these, and I'd like to just read them out, because I just think they're really, really lovely. One of the biggest questions that was raised was, what is daydreaming? And can everyone daydream? How do we daydream? How do we do it? What does it feel like? What can it reveal to us? And yeah, so these were the core questions that were coming out of our interactions. And the other big thing that happened was I was situated in this endangered wildflower ecology. And literally a few weeks later, wildfires swept through this landscape and burnt it to ashes and destroyed this magnificent part of the Cape Floral Kingdom. And so I feel that now this experiment and our experience really has become part of its history and the memories of this landscape. And I feel somehow it has become embedded into a whole nother cycle of life. And I just think that was quite powerful. So yeah, for me, those were the most magic moments, the moment when people describe those, and that stream of consciousness that came alive, that hasn't actually left me. It's like I keep going back to our WhatsApp group, reading it, and it's really quite overwhelming what we shared. And just beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So wonderful, and ecological imagination deep experience. It's beautiful. Dominique, could I invite you to tell us about your project?
Absolutely. Thank you, Annegret. That was so beautiful to hear. I think that's one of my favorite parts of being part of this community, is just seeing like all the different projects and explorations and just being so incredibly inspired. So hi everyone, bonjour. I'm Dominique. I was a big fan of this community, as just mentioned. Also, I participated in a huddle, which Caitlin will explain, but also received some funding for a project we called Queering Climate. So it was myself and a few other queer conspirators who are working in the climate space from India, US, and Canada. And we were really interested in collective imagination from a lens of queer liberation. And since we work in the climate space, we really see climate change as a symptom of intersecting crises and very much the need to reimagine and rebuild these systems. And so we were asking, what happens? Can queering help us rebuild and reimagine these systems? In other words, can centering queer identities, experiences, liberation help us uncover new ways of convening or doing action to address these issues? So our starting points were very much from a place of our own work within the climate space. And we were essentially trying to think about hosting a space where we can connect queer folks working in climate and or who were interested in working in climate in a way that could really kind of explore some of these questions. Basically, we ended up getting funding to do a first experiment during New York Climate Week, which is one of the largest climate events. Basically, like a bunch of people come to New York. It's in parallel to the UN climate, or sorry, not UN, the UN General Assembly. So there's a sort of big sort of governmental policy processes happening at the same time as a lot of sort of other kinds of climate conversations. And so we essentially piloted a first event where we really tried to sort of explore these questions. And it was really beautiful. Basically, we had 200 people come, and we had a bit of like a social media kind of promo parallel piece with our collaborators. So we ended up reaching quite a few people. And ultimately, it was just this 5-hour event. We thought people would come for like a couple hours. People were there as soon as we opened the doors. We weren't even ready. But so a 5-hour event with over 200 people. And it was all sort of centered around our speakers. We had 4 speakers from the Global South and Global Majority. And it was a night of sort of understanding how queer liberation is a climate issue. You know, what happens when we really think and examine our queer identities within the context of these big problems, and yeah, what can happen when we center our experiences. So that's what we did, and it was amazing. And so happy to share more or answer any questions.
And Dominique, what do you feel you learned as a practitioner about collective imagination?
So many things. I think one was just, you know, what happens to not only the space and how you can create a space where people can show up how they want and bring their full selves if they want to, but also in the sort of quality of conversations and relationships. We heard from a lot of folks who said, oh, this was not only the best event of New York Climate Week, but also that, you know, they made new friends, new collaborators. They sort of had these conversations which they felt, and again, like quoting people, just nowhere else during all of these climate events was a space where we can talk about imagination and queering and climate. And so I think as a practitioner, very much, you know, taking around how we can cultivate more of these spaces, especially in like big climate events where are often so rigid and so structured. And so yeah, that was one thing. I think another takeaway was just the importance of valuing and centering safety. So for a lot of folks, especially who come from communities where being queer is criminalized, you know, these are spaces they can come in and be their full selves, but also what are the different practices that we have to make sure. For example, no pictures. The people who didn't want to be photographed, we had special wristbands, and the photographer knew not to take photos of them, and those kinds of things. Not advertise the speakers beforehand. So I think there was sort of logistical questions as well as other process and bigger ones that we took away.
Thank you. All right, it's a whistle stop, I'm afraid, folks. So we're going to have to move on to Caitlin. Now, Caitlin hosted one of our huddles. And so, Caitlin, tell us about your huddle journey and anything that stands out.
Yeah, sure. I'll briefly start as the others did, just saying a little bit about myself and my practice. So I'm lucky enough to be Imagination Director at Radar, which is a global decentralized community building better futures. And collective imagination is a big part of our practice there, where we're bringing people together from around the world to imagine possible futures collectively in different ways. Another part of my life and my work is that I'm an executive creative director at an advertising agency, and I've had that career for many years. So I think for me, there's an interest in collective imagination that's informed by experiences in both those spaces. And so the huddle that I hosted was decentralized creativity. And what we were doing was exploring the potential of co-creation in Web3. What's interesting is, Jake, you mentioned that it's like not about the lone genius. And I think that was a big part of the writing and the invitation that I did, inviting people to the huddle, was really the interest in exploring creatively these new spaces enabled by technology that are allowing people to potentially work in decentralized ways. What does that look like? What does non-hierarchical collaboration and imagination look like? And I think what was really interesting, and I'd heard other people articulate similar things about their huddles, was that as we got into it, the doing was the learning. You know, we were like, I think the outcome is the huddle itself, you know, even though we and that we've also we're so grateful to have also received funding for our zine. So part of our practice was that we had a huddle, which is this 3-month-long, you know, collaborative learning journey. But what we wanted to do was a little bit learning by doing. So we wanted to see if we could produce a zine in a decentralized context in these new technology spaces to see what that learning experience would be like. So we met on the internet, and every time that we did, we used a collective imagination activity to sort of set the vibe for how we were coming together. So it was interesting because we sort of had this larger collective imagination practice about thinking about new ways of working and co-creating together, but then also doing these exercises to set that tone when we came together.
Great. And what really did you learn as a host and as a practitioner of this work? What have been your kind of takeaways from the experience, Caitlin?
I mean, I'm absolutely obsessed with the imagination revolution, and like it's like I'm a total convert in the possibilities for just like better futures and coming together, and what that can activate for both individuals and communities. So there's that's been unlocked for me. But I think what was really interesting was that, you know, we had 12 different people whose interest was piqued by an invitation to join a huddle on decentralized creativity. And with this sort of byline of exploring the potential of co-creation in Web3. And I think you know, I think I thought that we might be deep diving into, you know, blockchain possibilities and token governance and how that can enable you know, more equitable participation. And certainly we talked about those things, but what became really interesting at sort of, I would say, our first evidence table, which is where people really like lay out what their research looks like, what became really clear is that what had drawn us to this space wasn't the technology, it was like something much more human. And that is these like I keep laughing and saying I say paradigm shift too much, but like just these new ways of thinking, right? New narratives. And so people's things weren't about the tech, they were about stories. I was talking a lot about new realism with this idea that humans aren't inherently selfish. And I think what we learned is like upstream of imagination is this reflecting pool. And these spaces that cultivate and activate our collective imagination are also what many of us have a yearning for, and we think are really fertile grounds for innovation and collaboration and all of those things. So I think it's like, yeah, the learning was like it's a circle, you know, and like the process is the output is the process. So I'm grateful for that.
Thank you, Caitlin. And thank you to the three of you for sharing your experiences and your journeys, kind of really different, but very clearly sort of energizing. And I think the word that comes to mind so much for me is sort of deeply encouraging, you know, rooting you in the intuition that you had that this was the right way forward. So, so thank you. Those are really inspiring. Zara, over to you, I think.
Yes, over to me. So I'm going to share my screen with you all so that we can talk rather a lot more about this year and how you can get involved or stay involved if you've been involved already. So this is where we are for anyone who is unsure. And a sort of a quick roundup of everything that happened in year one. And we've heard some sort of deep dives into specific projects and huddles. But an overview is that we started the year last year with maybe 40 people on the mailing list. And gradually, and pretty organically, really, that has grown to 539 people on the list. So that's people who are interested in this practice and in this work as you are. And so we're really interested in this year how we continue to connect you together in lots of different ways. One of those ways will continue to be through the WhatsApp community that we started. Whether or not that ends up remaining the right format, we're not sure, but for now at least that's how we are encouraging people to connect together. And we also ran 8 open seed swap sessions last year, so open to everybody on the list, and where members of the community are sharing their practice or their wisdom or their insight through those sessions. We also had 7 huddles. So Caitlin talked about one of those. There were 7 hosted by 10 people who are part of this group who we train to run those huddles. We will be doing a few more in a slightly different format this year. We also had the practice fund, so £100,000 from JRF's Emerging Futures team to distribute within the community. And yeah, we formed a fund circle. So myself and Tim and Cass, I think, are both on the call as well. And we figured out a process, relatively light touch process, to be able to make decisions and distribute the money out to the places where you are experimenting and developing practice and doing all these great things. And we also started a shared scrapbook. So it's in the form of a mural board at the moment, but a place where everyone who received funding or who was part of a huddle or who is part of the community more broadly can come and document and pull in your insights and your practices, and where we can see all of that together and build a bit of a bank of things.
Thank you, Zara. So the first couple of months of this year, we were in conversation with the JRF, and that's our funders, to really clarify what's going to be the same and what the new goals might be. So what's really new in year 2 is that we're building towards a more visible and distilled set of outputs and outcomes, and particularly to interest of those who aren't really necessarily engaging with the collective imagination space, and in fact their sort of lack of engagement maybe limits the kinds of things that we can do and the kinds of ways that imagination can work. So we want to try and this year, as well as doing many of the things we've done already, focus on those audiences that have the potential to offer really exciting conditions for social transformation that works with collective imagination. Next one, Zara. So with lots of words on the screen, here are these 3 goals. So we're going to continue to support practitioners to deepen your practice, and we'll talk more about that in a mo. We'll be distilling and sharing the fruits of the community, things that you've learned and told us about, maybe frameworks or ways of explaining, like narratives that help us to talk about collective imagination practice as an impactful approach, and to help others imagine what that might be like, and demonstrating our collective story, a bit like Caitlin said. You know, one of the products of our work is this community itself. And also we're going to be focusing on nurturing credibility and legitimacy of this work with these key audiences. So how do we express and demonstrate and evidence and offer experiences that show how this works, or not even just show, but have the feeling of how this works, that people can experience and connect to. Next one, Zara. Jake.
That's me. Thanks, Hannah. So this is a bit of an overview of what the programme, or what we're putting on for the community this year. I think it's worth bearing in mind that this is also your community, and that there are resources here for you to do things that work for you. So this is kind of the structure that we're putting forwards, and we hope this works for you. But we're also really excited to hear what you'd like to be doing. And I'm not going to talk about any of the pieces in detail here, because we're actually going to break it down over the next slides. But you can just to give you a bit of orientation, you can see across the top we've got the sort of time. So between January and April, we've been sort of preparing the ground, getting everything ready. Got a growing and flowering session appropriately over the summer, where lots of activity will be happening, lots of different kinds of things. And then in the autumn and into winter, harvest and scatter, which is really about celebrating what we've done and creating a set of outputs that can allow it to grow again the next year in whatever form that is. And we've got, I guess, broadly 3 different kinds of work that we're going to be doing. We've got some stuff which we've called whole community, which is the top white bar, which are things that are open to everybody, whether you're in the community or not. They're public events. Then in the next row, we've got what we've called huddles and groups. So that's much more intensive, more committed ways of learning to develop your practice, learning from others, learning together in ways that grow the capability of the community. And then the last row, which Zara will talk about in more detail, is the practice fund, to offer some resources to power all of this forwards.
So in the run-up for to creating this plan, we had some conversations with the community, and many of you joined, and for that, you know, much thanks. So I just wanted to reflect back on what you've said you've really valued about year 1. And I think, you know, one of the main things was just how encouraging it's been for people to be part of a community that really gets it and sort of gets the radicality of what we're doing. You've enjoyed learning, you've enjoyed getting money, which helps you to do something completely different. People in huddles have talked about how it's helped them to focus their journey. And in general, people have said that their practice has been shaped in new ways by being part of this community. And I also asked you what you wanted more of, and in order to partly to inspire us about this next year. And when I read these out, think also about whether you would like to pitch in and make an application to the fund to carry any of these forward, because they've already got people that are clearly saying they're interested in them. So the sense of mapping our interests, maybe sharing reading and frameworks that work for us when we're explaining collective imagination or have inspired us, help with languaging this work. How do we explain it to different audiences? It's so emergent and new. There's not an established language yet. Some people talked about how we wanted more time together to work. This work is slow, and that, you know, and here I am rushing through slides. It's exactly the opposite of this, you know, but more like lying in a meadow together. And the desire to meet in person and to connect with one another. Next one, please, Sarah. So in particular, we talked at these sessions which we held in the run up to this. We talked about kind of 3 areas where we'd love to hear your ideas. So we've had seed swaps previously, and they've had a kind of a relatively set format of sharing practice and sharing stories about the work that we do. But this year we want to invite you to suggest some formats that excite you. So people have talked about a book club, maybe. People have talked about hearing back from the huddles. People have wondered, you know, like, could we have a session where lots of practitioners offer different things and we have different breakout rooms so we can have streams? So that was also something people talked about. In terms of enabling you to connect to one another, so rather than just connecting to us, the stewards, but connect across the network, we have started a WhatsApp group a while ago. And if one of you is up for putting the WhatsApp link in the chat, that would be great. And that's got some themed groups on particular topics that you can connect to, but it hasn't been a very busy space, which is maybe a blessing. But it also raises a question for me: is it the right way for people to connect? So we're really interested in anyone that's got any particular ideas, either about energizing that or whether a different way of connecting up would be better. And I think this again goes back to that sort of mapping people's interests. Would somebody like to step in with an application to the fund to try and do that, for example? And then I asked if people had any other wild card ideas. Again, people were interested in building practice community, like maybe little chapters in their locations. Could we build a collective imagination reading list? I think we could definitely do that. So expect an email asking for your top reading. Spend time together, longer time together, finding language, and potentially like check-in sessions. So again, these are just, I'm just sort of putting these out to you to say, here's some of the things others in the group are interested in. If you'd like to take them forward, the fund is the place to go, because we'd love to support anyone who would like to take these forward. All right, so let me talk about seed swaps. So far, these are online sessions. In fact, you're sort of at one now, and people show up. And usually what happens is I find a practitioner and I support them to put on a session of sharing practice. And it's worked really well. And we've had lots of people come and it's been a lot of fun. But if you have another idea, then you're welcome to email me and to suggest it. And I will help you to put that on if that feels like it's got a good fit. So, you know, we want to be a bit more flexible this year with seed swaps, but they will still be happening. Jake.
Well, yeah, so this is something that's new for this year, which is the idea we're going to have 3 different open public sessions, which we're going to have leaders in imagination in conversation with each other. To be confirmed, watch this space, and we'll be sending out details of that as it comes. But the idea really is to help all of us to stretch our practice in different ways, and we're going to be exploring through those talks 2 big questions. One, which, how can we land work that's like this in environments that have power and resource but don't share this culture or this way of working? That's a I think lots of people in the community have talked about what a big gulf that is. So how can we start thinking about how we bridge that? And then secondly, looking across the field of imagination practice, we're going to ask people to talk about the trends that they can see emerging and perhaps where we ought to focus our efforts to grow. So yeah, that's that part.
And so we also have the Practice Fund this year. Again, it is currently open for your requests. We've just published some new guidance around making a request from the fund. And yeah, the form is open. And this year we have £125,000. So some of that is earmarked for practitioners in Europe specifically, and then the rest is more open. We're going to do 2 batches, sort of front loaded a little bit, so that we can bring in as many outcomes and insights as we can into our sort of harvesting phase in autumn. And it's still very much the same prompt this year. All the fund requests need to be aiming to strengthen and deepen collective imagination practice. But we're also particularly interested this year in requests that engage with some of the specific audiences, as Jake was just saying, and that first important question on the previous slide, audiences and context. So how can we land this practice in other spaces as well? We're going to be giving some more detail on the fund in a minute, and sort of guidelines and steps to go through, but that's an overview to begin with. We are going to have 3 huddles this year, and it's going to be a bit of a different approach. So again, it's going to be all about connecting imagination practice with contexts where maybe there is a bit of a different culture. And we're going to have half of the participation for each of these huddles made up of practitioners. So folk like yourselves, possibly from the community, and then half of each huddle made up of folk from the other context. So we're going to have one that will be place-based and happening face-to-face in partnership with a local authority, TBC. We're going to have another one that is going to connect with central government as a context via people who are working in innovation labs. And a third that will be open to people from UK local authorities, and that will be the context to connect practice to. So we're going to be sharing much more information, and sign-ups will be happening a little bit later in the year for huddles to take place over the summer. But to let you know and to sort of see the idea that these are coming, and if you're interested in how you can connect your practice into some of these contexts, then this is going to be a great opportunity to do that.
But we're also aware that some of you might have been hoping to run a huddle in the way that we did last year, where we allowed you to propose the topic. So we're not doing huddles in that way this year, but we are still open to you suggesting what we're calling depth groups. And these don't have anything like as much structure. They will be your own self-styled learning journey, with a maximum of maybe 12 people in them. And we can offer you some support. So we can offer you tools from Huddlecraft on their knowledge about peer learning journey and how to make that go well. We can offer you some financial resource to support your time. We can promote your particular depth group, your learning journey to the network, so we can help you to recruit people around your idea. And we can offer you some light touch coaching. That would be either from me or Jake, to get you started and to be a sounding board. So please don't feel that you're not able to do a thematic sort of depth type learning journey. We can use the fund for that.
Well, actually, do you know what? Can I add one thing to your slide about huddles, Zara? Because I just wanted to say that all those huddles are actually open to everybody. They've got they've got a focus, for example, on local government, but only half the people might be working local government. The other half might be imagination practitioners who would like to land their practice there. So just to be clear to the people, to everybody on the call, that actually these are open to you. But the part that I was supposed to be talking about, which is sense making, is that we are going to host and facilitate a series of conversations around some of the core questions that seem to be coming up around the community to help us collectively deepen our understanding in relation to these questions. We've got 3 themes. One is about practice in place, about how do we create the conditions for collective imagination in places and organisations, which I know is something that a lot of you are interested in. The second one is about practice rigour, meaning what does it mean to practice collective imagination well? How do we support the development of that? And also, you know, I guess when imagination is a buzzword, how are we clear about when people are actually doing something that is helpful or helpfully imaginative, perhaps. And then thirdly, a strand about developing opportunities and professional identity, because I know lots of you are perhaps on the cusp of thinking about, well, what if that's me? What if I'm a collective imagination practitioner? What would that mean for my career? How would that work? So a space to really unpack that together. And I guess the last thing to say on this is that we'll be sending out invitations to take part in those conversations over the next couple of months. Anyway, sorry, thanks.
And lastly, and I know that is a lot of different things, many things for you to engage with. Lastly, we will be drawing things together toward the end of this year into what we have imagined as a seed library. What that means in practice is yet to be co-created by us. We were aiming to explore this last year, but it became sort of clear that what we'd done was scattered so many seeds, and so much possibility was happening. So we followed that. So we will be distilling insights and learnings toward a seed library at the end of this year, and then sharing that and telling the collective story of the community, yes, toward the end of the year. So there will be ways to engage with that and support and co-create, and we will be sharing more as the year goes on.
Well, thanks, Sarah.
I'm going to start sharing this screen, Jake, so that you can see everyone while you're fielding questions.
Oh, thanks. Brilliant. So that's quite a lot of information to absorb. So we thought we'd just take a breather, take a pause for questions. We don't, Hannah, Zara, we don't have as much time as we had planned, but I thought perhaps if everybody would like to, if you do have questions that you're sitting with right now, please put them in the chat, and then we'll just take a couple minutes to respond to some of them, and some of the practice fund questions, Zara, you can weave those into your next part of the conversation. So I'll just give half a minute or something if people want to just have a think about questions that are arising that you'd like clarified or in question alert. That's a good start. Okay, so while everybody's potentially typing or thinking or daydreaming, what are the questions that we've had so far? Lots about funding, which Zara, I'm hoping perhaps you could touch on in the next section. Can you apply for more than one thing, for example? And is this going to be distributed? Yes, Hannah's going to send that out afterwards. Oh, that's an interesting question for Vanessa, which perhaps Zara, you can talk to.
Yes, I think some of the practice fund questions will get answered in the next section, and then if there are any that aren't answered, we can answer them.
And another funding question from Kevin for you, Zara.
Yes, so the answer to that question about UK, we can accept requests from outside the UK. And last year we had this thing where people had to be part of a huddle in order to access the funding if they were outside of the UK, but we're not doing huddles in the same way this year, and there will be a few less. So yes, you are able to make a request, and what you need to do is check that you're somewhere where you can receive funding via Open Collective and WISE in conjunction. That's important because that's how we're distributing the funds. All of this is captured in the fund guidance that we'll share with you as well.
Brilliant. My sense is that we should move on just to stick to time, Zara. I think there's lots of technical questions that we can come back to, and perhaps we can respond
Yes.
more specifically on those.
Okay.
Happy with that, Zara?
Yeah,
Lovely.
let's go ahead. Okay. So a little bit more about the practice fund. So last year we made 36 micro grants. So you've heard a little bit about some of these projects, but we funded such a broad range of things. We really did. Learning journeys, workshops, communities, experiments, toolkits, zines, collaborations, field trips. You know, it was really a broad set of activities, and also connecting collective imagination to a wide range of themes as well. So some of those you can see there on the screen. And then what we've been doing in the sort of latter half of the year, or more recently, is starting to try and draw back in the outcomes and the learnings and the documentation and the photos. And here you can see a bit more of a zoomed in window into one of the spaces within that shared scrapbook that I mentioned earlier, which is how we're inviting people to document their practices. So it's not a traditional reporting, but of course we are really, really interested in what happens and what you gather. So I wanted to share a little bit about what we learned in the first year. So firstly, the fund circle and participation in that fund circle, that has been a great learning experience in and of itself, because it's given us the opportunity to spot patterns and really hone a sense of what do we mean by collective imagination practice. But it has taken us time to really learn our way into our roles with that. So we're hoping partway through the year to open up an application for at least one spot in the fund circle, so that we can start to rotate who's playing those roles in the community. We've been learning about what it means to be accountable to the community as a whole. And that's been really challenging in the fund circle, because everyone's requests are for wonderful, magical work. And so staying accountable to the whole and saying no sometimes in order to say yes elsewhere has been a bit of an edge and a learning curve, but feels important if we're to continue this work beyond this year as well. We drew out some common themes in terms of the requests that we chose not to support. So I'm not going to talk about them now, but again, they're captured in the guidance blog post. Maybe Hannah or Jake, you could pop that in the chat. So I think that should hopefully be really supportive for making requests this year. And yeah, just some reflections around, you know, whilst I think we have created a relatively light touch process for distributing funds, it takes a lot to make some of those decisions. And you know, we've got a growing list of people and a similar amount of money for last year. So that need to make decisions is still there. So all of the funding requests must aim to strengthen and deepen collective imagination practice. And then, as I said earlier on, we're also particularly interested this year in how practice can be landed in other contexts and spaces. You need to be over 18 to apply. You need to be signed up to the mailing list, very low bar for eligibility. It's just a short form. And you need to be residing in a country where you can receive the funds via Open Collective and WISE in conjunction. We will fund requests from people who are contributing in some way to the practice community. So that feels important with this, that it's not necessarily for people who are just rolling up to access the funding. So part of the questions in the form is about sharing how you are connecting into the community. We will fund requests that respond to the definition of collective imagination practice that we've been working with, and to the set of prompts that we have. And I'll show both of those things in a second. And we can have requests from individuals and from organizations as well. There are some things that we won't fund, which you can read here. So solo activities, certain kinds of equipment, subscriptions, flights, requests above 3K. And in general, we won't fund more than one request per person per batch. But if you have applied last time and you want to apply again, particularly around deepening work that you've started, we're really open to that. And it says in general because we think there will be exceptions. So there might be people who are part of a huddle and also applying to the fund, and we really encourage that. So this is our current working description of collective imagination practice. I think I said definition before, and I meant to say description, because the idea is that it's very, very hard to hold a definition of something that is so emergent. But these are the elements, I suppose, that we've been working with. So we are interested in work that is practice-based. And so when you're thinking about a request, is practice at the center of it? We're thinking about work that's rooted in growing the capacity of people to see more possibilities. Work that emphasizes the collective. So if your work is about imagination, but less about the collective, in order to be eligible for the fund, you'll need to bring the collective element into it. We're really interested in work that can lead to material changes and shifts. So we're interested in the impact potential of this work, as well as the process. And we're interested in multidisciplinarity as well. And I think that is sort of really clear from the examples that were shown at the beginning. I shall not go through all of this, but this is, again, all captured in the blog post. We've got lots of prompts under these different headings, which we hope will spark your imagination around how you could apply for the fund and what for. And we have one new area, which is serving the community. And I think Jake and Hannah spoke to that earlier. If there are things you want to see happening in this community that we aren't offering, then you can apply to the fund to lead that. So yeah, our question to you really is, what could you do? What could you create? How could you be in service to the goals that we have or to other goals? And here's a reminder of that key information that I shared at the beginning, and the date for requests to be in by midday, April 30th, if you want to go for the first round. So I'm going to pause, and Jake, I wonder if are there more questions in the chat that you can field for me that I haven't yet answered? Ooh, Jake has vanished and become a grey square. Hannah, I wonder if you've been noticing any questions that I haven't.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's anything that's particularly extra. There was one question about whether there'll be money for participants of huddles.
Yes, there will be an access budget for huddles. Yes, there will.
Yeah, I've got the rooms ready, Zara.
Amazing. Okay, so now we're going to invite you all to have a chat in breakout rooms with a simple prompt of what could the fund and the set of activities that we're offering make possible for you this year. So how might you engage? What could you propose? What would you like to do? And have a good chat about that. And then when you come back, we'll hear from a couple of people if we have time. So enjoy a chat.
Okay, Zara, and just before we jump in, there was one question about what does it mean to be an active participant in the community if we've only just finding out about it? That's totally fine. I think what we're trying to say, you know, one of the things we'll ask you will be like, how are you going to share it with the community? So if you're at the beginning, it's like, how is this part of being a member of this community, rather than coming in, getting a bit of funding and then disappearing off, if that makes sense. All right, I'll open the rooms.
Hopefully that was an interesting, thought-provoking conversation, and we'd love to hear from a few people in a second about what you discussed. I just wanted to, so 2 questions that were in the chat that we didn't answer yet about the fund. So one was about, can we apply as a collaboration where we were applying for 3K each? We just spoke about that while you were in the breakout room, and I think the honest answer is we're not sure, because this didn't come up last time. So what would be really helpful would be to email us through to the fund email address a bit more about what you're planning and what you're thinking, and then we can get back to you and have a bit more time to think about that one. But I feel like it's definitely not an automatic no. It could be possible. And then there was a question about, could it be 3K toward another project that's already funded? And the answer to that is yes, as long as the 3K is funding collective imagination practice within that larger project. So obviously that's still important, but yes. So yeah, I would love to hear, what did you talk about in your breakout rooms? What are you thinking of using the fund for? How would you like to engage in this program? Who would like to share? And would love to just hear verbally rather than in the chat this time. Anyone who'd like to jump in?
We had a really lovely discussion with Kevin Sutton and Claire. So we were in Southampton, Folkestone, and Canada, and it was, I really appreciated, I think it was the nicest breakout I've ever had, actually, because I really appreciated their sense of curation there, because we were all coming from language-based practices. Yeah, we could have gone on talking for a long time. We were looking at very different things in different ways, but I found it a really invigorating moment. I don't know if Kevin or Claire would like to say anything.
Curation was totally organic, by the way, unintentional.
Wow.
Amazing, just amazing.
So that was just good fortune.
Yeah, that was just amazing how much in common, and I think we could have gone on for another half an hour at least. So yeah.
And did your conversation surface any ways that you might be able to use the fund to deepen practice, or anything else?
Kevin, if I can speak for you, because Kevin's just put in they've just put in that they're in a loud coffee shop, so they skip things. But if it's all right, Kevin, to just speak on your behalf for a moment, because they're in Canada and wanted to check that that was possible, right, Kevin?
Yeah, there's a quiet moment, so I can speak a little bit to it. We actually are engaged in practical. It's a very experimental space, what we're trying to do around well-being economies. Because what I was saying is that there's some objective things parameters you can put around that, but it quickly becomes very subjective. And a lot of the work that we do kind of orients around huddling. Like we struck a steering group, and we've done some modeling, but now we're kind of stuck at our funding block of like, how do we now fund this next wave of experimentation, figuring out what does well-being look like in a group, in a community. So that's kind of what we're looking
Thanks, Kevin. Yes, slightly hard to hear, but I caught snippets of it. So yeah, maybe the fund could be a route forward for some of your work. Anyone else from another breakout room, maybe? What did you discuss? How might you be able to engage with the fund and the programme of activities?
Okay, can I?
Yes, go ahead.
Everyone seems very quiet, so let's take a moment. Well, I'm very excited to hear the two people, Toby and Lena, in our breakout group, are both sort of feeling their way to see what it could be. So Lena is in the film space, and she is thinking about how imagination practices could maybe be developed for film practitioners and her community, which I think is super interesting. And Toby is thinking about economics of public art. Am I getting that right, Toby? Yeah. So that's maybe something that actually falls really in line with some of what you're all thinking about for next year. And so I haven't shared too much in my group because, you know, I've already done an experiment, but I encourage both of them because I feel we just have to go for it and get experimental and get together and do things, and the path unfolds.
Yeah, thanks, Annegret. That's definitely the vibe. And particularly on the first idea that you mentioned, there was a request that we funded last year that is certainly running parallel to some of those ideas. So if you want to get in touch, we can connect you up if it's not someone you're already connected to. So we maybe have time to hear from one more group. Go on. Tell us what you were talking about. We want to know.
Oh, we've got one in the chat, Zara, from Finn. I'm interested in exploring methods leveraging heritage and history for imagination practice. And like, get in touch if anyone would like to chat about this. Or you've got Rami with a thumbs up there, Finn.
Already one thumbs up.
Anyone else?
Thanks, Finn.
Heritage and history for imagination practice. Yeah, I'll add a thumb to that.
I could share. I've been really pressed looking around and seeing everyone, many people completely lost in this moment, no idea how to like be in their bodies and engage with all of the atrocities of the world. And so I've been feeling really inspired to build a space, a play space, an experimental playscape for people to come in and learn how to human, how to like come back and meet themselves, to figure out what their values are, and to move from like an intentional embodied place rather than from their own compliance. So yeah, that's what's like on my heart that I've been considering creating, and it feels like the space could be a really beautiful, nourishing tool for that. Thank you for all the work y'all have been doing.
And yeah, a few hearts popped up as you were saying that. So there were definitely some people in the space connecting with that as well. So thank you for sharing some of that. That's really wonderful to hear. And we look forward to, yeah, receiving requests and getting to know you this year. Hannah, shall we wrap up and share next steps?
Bring it into land. All right. I'm going to share my screen for just one slide, which is our final slide. So our next steps, I will be writing up everything that you've heard as a blog and getting that out to people, to all of you in the next few days or so. Well, all of you, if you're on the mailing list. So number one, if you're not on the mailing list, join the mailing list. Also, you can join our WhatsApp group. I've put all the links in the chat again. And yeah, make fund requests by midday at the end of April, 30th of April. and look out for more invites and info soon. And in particular, our next meeting will be our May open session. And I'm thinking, given so many folks have said how they're interested in sort of frameworks and language and collective imagination, it's going to be a kind of bring and share of the frameworks or ways of expressing what this work is that you found useful, and even bring your disasters, because that's really helpful too. We've got some very juicy disasters from Canopy. We can share some of those and a few successes. So it's going to be a sort of bring and share around that topic. So I'll send out the invite to the mailing list and the WhatsApp group and on Twitter in the next few days. So I think that's everything. I'm going to stop this and just get a lovely look at you all again before we go. So thank you very much, and be in touch, and look out for the blog to catch up on us again, and we'll see you down the road.
Thanks, everyone. Good to see you. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.